The keyboard space has gotten quite exciting over the last little while just because we have new features that are kind of revolutionary in the gaming space with Rapid Trigger. We have features that are now banned in the esports space like Snap Tap. It feels to me like the hardware aspects of a good gaming keyboard have been nailed down and they're still kind of being refined over time, but it's also the software that is getting really good to make sure that they complement each other too. So here I have the Huntsman V3 Pro TKL, which is supposed to be like the ultimate gaming keyboard from Razer right now. But I want to go back in time to see how the Huntsman features evolved and whether or not this is actually the right way forward, because right now the V3 Pro TKL has the lowest Amazon scores out of the entire Huntsman lineup. So basically, if you want to stay within the Huntsman ecosystem, have Razer added too much bloat to their latest? And this video is sponsored by Razer, but without any editorial control, so all opinions here are our own. So let's Huntsman, shall we? Now, the very first Huntsman was the Huntsman Elite, and it was far from perfect. We had glossy ABS keycaps, no standard bottom row, an insanely thick dual USB cable, loose media buttons, and just not a competitive price. But it arrived with Razer's optomechanical switches. Because of the optical nature of the switches, we didn't have to worry about debounce delay, and lifespan doubled to 100 million clicks versus the traditional around 50 million clicks for the MX Cherry at the time. I do not run clicky switches right now, but if I was, the Razer Purples would be on my radar because they feel lighter than MX Blues and just have a nice, pleasant sound profile too. And of course, this being Razer, we had a fancy magnetic wrist rest and a full perimeter RGB illumination. And so despite all these like flagship level features, it was actually the Huntsman TE that got Razer noticed in the keyboard space. I personally love that keyboard because it really showed that Razer was listening. We got a removable USB-C cable, excellent double shot PPT keycaps, really smooth switches that were linear and light. They didn't sound that great, but they felt really nice. The TKL form factor was perfect, and just many people appreciated that we finally got a decent performance keyboard from Razer. A lot of that carries over from the Huntsman to the Huntsman because it's their esports lineup where they are only focusing on performance, and a lot of those similar aspects that we saw and loved on the original Huntsman TE obviously have carried over into the Huntsman V2 and now the Huntsman V3 Pro. For example, the TE introduced a standard bottom row, which we now take for granted. That's the standard now in the industry, which allows you to swap out keycaps and not worry about fitment and stuff. That was also found on the smaller, the 60% keyboards, and on the full size as well. Razer also got good praise for their font choice on the Huntsman lineup that is clean, legible, and non-gamery whatsoever, which is a big departure from what was introduced previously. Then we have the Huntsman V2 Analog that introduced Razer's analog optical switches that gave you full customization on the actuation point and obviously analog movement with a keyboard. It definitely paved the way forward to what we have now with the latest Huntsman, just in terms of software customization and all the tweaks that were necessary to refine this switch. When the Huntsman V2 launched, Razer addressed some of the major concerns that were associated with the Huntsman TE, and particularly making the switch slightly heavier and changing the actuation point from 1mm to 1.2 to avoid accidental presses. The updated switches now also feature dampeners and the added foam into the case so the keyboard doesn't sound so metallic and hollow. And they started to push the whole 8K Hertz feature into the keyboards, which was more of a marketing flex than actual benefit for gamers, let's be honest. And physically, it looked the same, just with more keycap colorways to emphasize the standard bottom row that everyone appreciates. Of course, like the previous Huntsman family, the V3 Pro is available in 3 sizes, the 60%, the TKL, and the full size. The sound characteristics are not the best, especially when we're thinking about the thockiness that is currently found on most gaming keyboards. Here, because we have individually stabilized keys, you can never expect the thockiness on this type of switch, but they are incredibly smooth. They feel really nice, but they don't sound that great. I mentioned the sound quality because Razer actually tried to rectify that issue with the Huntsman V2, to which those upgrades can also be found on the Huntsman Mini. These actually sound quite good, and this is the Razer linear optical red switch. But with Razer's pursuit for perfection in the Huntsman lineup, we have the new Gen 2 switches, the Razer analog optical switches, that give us way more functionality versus what was offered in the previous Huntsman lineups. That is probably the most exciting update when it comes to like the physical aspects. It's good that we have volume knob and some media playback controls that actually very similar in design to the Huntsman Elite. But here, now we have just a slightly more flashy presentation, but still with the performance priority because it combines the light actuation and awesome stability of each switch despite the somewhat clunky sounding stabilizers. But all this tech that's built into the switch allows for full actuation customization from 0.1 millimeters to 4 millimeters and absolutely insane sensitivity on the keys. Like just breathing on the keys almost would activate it, and you have to play around with which sensitivity and actuation point would be better for your fingers. And then we have Rapid Trigger, which is an insanely powerful tool for FPS games that complements the ability to set your own actuation point as well. For example, with traditional mechanical switches, the reset point is fixed, meaning you almost have to lift the finger off the key for it to reset. With Rapid Trigger, that's no longer the case because your actuation point may become your reset point as well, and Razer gives you a full range between 1 to 0.1 millimeters on when the key should reset after the actuation point. All that means is that your inputs become way more responsive, and that's a crazy advantage for any FPS. And also we have full analog functionality as well if you're into that, meaning your character movement speed is dependent on how far down you press. In the games that I play, like Helldivers 2, analog movement is really fun, but you can no longer call in stratagems with WASD. You have to remap those to arrow keys, for example. And since the game sees both the keyboard and the controller connected together, you might have some UI elements that pop in and out that are confused between keyboard and the controller. But it is a value add for some games, just not for the games that I play. And they also rolled out SnapTap with the V3 Pro keyboards, which is highly controversial, that allows for instantaneous strafing side to side if the opposite direction is already still active. So it basically cancels that input and prioritizes the latest input, which for CSGO made side strafing way more intuitive and simple, but it's now banned as that feature with Valve. In Overwatch, that is incredibly powerful. SnapTap, being able to like side strafe, especially in the air, is incredibly powerful. In Valorant, it seems to be not as useful. And just to be clear, Razer did not invent this functionality. They just baked it into the keyboard on a firmware level, so you don't need external software to activate the null bind or the SOCD. I think it's a matter of time until more keyboards implement it. Of course, Wooding now has it based on the popularity that Razer got with the SnapTap feature. There's also the quick profile swap on the Razer Huntsman V3 Pro that lets you quickly switch between up to 6 custom keyboard profiles using the shortcut keys with on-the-fly LED feedback as well. And each profile can store personalized settings like your actuation points, lighting, macros, rapid trigger, either on board or through Razer Synapse. And of course, you can go back to the standard profile for better typing experience. And unfortunately, if you just look at the flagship pricing of keyboards right now, everything is like 200 plus, from Logitech, from Corsair, from SteelSeries, from Wooding, and Razer, of course, which is why the latest Huntsman doesn't feel as special as the original Huntsman TE because of the price point. Although they have baked in way more functionality and performance elements that you would expect on an esports level keyboard. It feels like this is like the flagship level functionality and design, but unfortunately, in terms of price, you could say that, you know, Razer pulled the Razer. But let me know if you agree. I'm Dmitry. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you in the next video.